Welcome to this high-speed Inside Star Citizen analysis. We're going to go into the sprint report, and then we're going to go into Justin Chambers' comments and ideas for people who are trying to get into content creation for games.
Moving along to ship and vehicle updates, the Drake Vulture continues to progress through its white box stage with these early looks at the upcoming salvage ship.
The Vulture is something I'm going to stand by saying is a buying game when it's finally out. I think it's a little expensive for an advanced starter ship, but it is the equivalent of a prospector in the salvage category. It's small, it's low risk, it does have a bed. It interestingly, on top of all that, has on it tractor beams, scraping systems that are designed to basically rip apart a ship and pieces. And it has that nice cargo ramp on the back you can see now with the white boxing. So it will be a good ship. I just feel it's a buying game. I'm glad to see that it's not the original vision of like a giant motorcycle where like you're riding this rig of parts. It's more of a professional ship that will take you a long ways. So I stand by what I said about the one-person salvage ship. It's not, to me, it's a little pricey for an advanced starter. I think it's at 140 USD. Previously it was at Warbomb 120 USD. I think it's a little high, and it'll probably go a little higher when it's ready to fly. But I think eventually it will be available in game, and I think you'll be surprised with the price. So good ship if you have the patience to wait or be willing to rent or buy it in game.
And then of course we're heading into the biggest ship event of the year, and preparations are already underway for the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo 2951, with these looks at potential logos for this year's event. I like the one with the swoosh.
It looks like we're going back to IAE as of like 2 years ago. Well, last year it was more the gold, and you can see there's one hint of gold in one of those samples, but most of them are Orison colored or variants of an Orison coloration. I gotta say, I wasn't shocked by seeing this, and the only thing I'm shocked by is if Orison is hosting IAE based on those color schemes. And this is speculation, but based on those color schemes, I wouldn't be surprised if Orison is hosting, or at the very least, New Babbage. You see, their color systems are so close. You could probably get away with that if Orison was going to be worked on, and then you can act as your secondary, be like, look, if it doesn't work out in Orison, we can push it back to New Babbage. I do know they're working on the ship showroom, the Crusader showroom on Orison, but I don't think they have an entire convention hall on Orison, although there is a ton of empty buildings. Ash and me went around exploring a lot of them, but they don't have interiors yet. But there's plenty of platforms that are not accessible yet, and there's one waiting in the wings that we'll see that seems to be more developed than the other ones that are not with interiors.
Finally, before we let you go, we have two Crusader-based updates to share this week. The first being the continuing development of atmospheric pressure damage for vehicles and people. You can see here the basics of the system at play. As the player character moves forward, the pressure increases. And then the same here with vehicles. Now these are just the designer effects at the moment, but now that it's working, it'll move to VFX in a few weeks when they have schedule before making its way into the persistent universe proper.
I like that Orison's pressure mechanics are going to apply also to water eventually. I also like the fact that they apply differently to players of different types of armor and different types of ships. I think that's really going to add some depth to the game and even give, say for example, an industrial player with a strengthened ship be able to dive into the clouds just slightly more than the combat vessel, maybe a Buccaneer or something that has a lot of exposed parts. That's good in combat, but not so good in those hazardous areas. So pretty cool stuff. Can't wait to see some of the emerging gameplay.
Last week we showed you a look inside 3 of the new hospitals coming online for Alpha 315, and eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed a 4th snuck in there along with the upcoming space clinics. But the team in Montreal is also working on additional hospitals for other landing zones, such as this white box tour of Maria Pure of Heart in Lorville. And even in its early state, you can see the influence of Lorville's architecture and severe style that's likely to set it just a little bit apart from its fellow facilities. You can see here a first look at its lobby, and of the ward rooms further in. Now, as we've mentioned, Hospitals are the forebearers of new player healing mechanics and all the changes they will bring to life in the persistent universe, and the first major contribution from our expanding team in Montreal. And if you want to know even more about that team, be sure you check out last week's Star Citizen Live, available now on YouTube, for your first chance to meet several of the folks blending new locations and gameplay throughout the Stanton system and beyond.
Anybody who's going to Leavesden Station on the way to CBD, the Central Business District at Lorville, likely ran past the signs saying, "Hey, hang a left for Maria Pure Heart," if you're coming from the Habs or from the spaceport, really, because of the way the Lorville is set up. You have one train station on the one end of L19 and one train station on the other end of L19 that kind of lead in two different directions. So what ends up happening is Maria Pure Heart's kind of basically at a centrally located place. If you're exiting the Habs to meet up with a friend who had been injured and needs to get healed, basically they're going to be ahead of you. You'll go out of the dorms, hang a left, and instead of making another left to go towards the spaceports like you normally would, you would hang a right, and you would walk straight ahead, and you would end up being smack dab at the Maria Pure Hearts hospital. I think the white boxing is pretty cool. I think it's very interesting that it's not next to the Habs like in New Babbage. It's got a little bit of distance, but not a lot. So it kind of has its own character in this setup. And I do like the look of the location. I think it fits the Lorville aesthetic. And I mean, as somebody who saw a lot of machinima in Lorville, well, in the CBD to be fair, and some in L19, it is welcome to have another place to shoot. It is welcome to see a place that fits its aesthetic and keeps Lorville growing and growing as it needs to be as a prime planetary landing location.
Work also continues concepting the shape and style of hacking ports, soon to be found throughout the persistent universe. Now, previous thoughts leaned heavily on the squared fold-out box you can see here, but the team wanted to see if they could make them maybe a little less intrusive and more compatible with the variety of areas one might find them in. So this second round of work focused on a recess design that can pop out of not just the wall, but any floor as well, opening up far more places that they can be found. The team is also exploring iconography that will help players identify these particular panels when on their travels, as well as further refining the variety of hacking chips players may need depending on the task at hand, complete with little carabiner hooks. Give me a keyring I can wear on my belt, character team. Ultimately, hacking aims to provide more complexity and a variety of options in how they tackle a situation, and we'll be learning more about the gameplay and how players will interact with these terminals next quarter.
Very happy to see hacking get developed. I know it was something that was pushed back, and a lot of folks were upset about that gameplay loop kind of being pushed. Kind of like a support gameplay loop for mission types and for player versus player content, such as breaking into a ship or into a base in the future. So this is going to be an important part of the game in many different ways, and I would like to see how you can counteract hacking. That would be fun to see as well. Is there safeguards you can put in place, maybe even physical or kinetic safeguards you can put in place? Is there a way to detect hacking? Will you get notified someone is trying to hack a door in your ship? Or if they have a high enough skill level and they beat the minigame well enough, do they beat that defense? So, I think this is going to be kind of interesting, to say the least. I'm curious about how that kind of interplay is going to go, if there is going to be any interplay, or if it's just going to be attacking attempt, and only when they fail, it sets off some sort of alarm. So, very curious. I can't wait to see more about it, and I'm glad to see that there's many options for mission makers and the other folks who need to make facilities that work alongside hacking. Right now in the game, hacking's primary reason for existing is so you can get rid of your crime stat without having to go to prison if you're lucky enough to get there and there's nobody else there, or because it's defeating the purpose if you manage to clear crime stat and then you have to go hurt somebody on the way out and then you reset your crime stat. So I guess we're going to see how this goes.
Let's jump back to the Nyx system with a look at some of the flora being developed for the various services we showcased several weeks ago. Starting with this agave succulent that's broken into smaller component stages, starting with ground scatter to base plant and then flowering stalk. Now, as with ships, this is the white box stage for these plants, used to validate proportions, silhouettes, and such things like potential variants. We also have these aloe plants, which should come in super handy because of all the sunscreen you'll need, because of the dying star. And that's Pyro, it's not Nyx, so that joke doesn't make any sense. And Justin is clearly spending his time overseeing the edit of his own segment, or he would have cut this. Moving along.
Amanda is one of the fellow editors, as I understand it, if I'm wrong, for the content creation team. You see a peek of her at the end of this video where Justin Chambers has this discussion, and he's in a video call with her. And on the primary video, which I'll also link, the official video, it's much more in depth in the origin story of Justin and also his team that works alongside him. That includes Amanda. So the joke is that Amanda was doing the edit for the B part of this video, and she left in that joke that didn't make any sense just to mess with Jared. So it's a little bit editing humor there.
Underneath those plants, a sprint was recently completed on some of the new geology assets that will be sprinkled across the surface of Nyx 1, such as these smooth layered plateaus. What you're seeing here are several different class sizes, from small to large, straight out of the Houdini software suite. Now, once they're properly integrated in the game engine, systemic features like terrain color pickup and biome accumulation will alter the assets, further blending them into whatever area of the planet we happen to find them in. There's also these sexy modeling shots here. I'm gonna call this one Bam Bam, this one Barney Rubble, and you can be Fred Flintstone. You complain, but these jokes are my bedrock. Alright, let's move on up to a pterodactyl eye view and take a look at continuing development of Nyx 1 height maps. Now, for those of you familiar with the lore, this particular planetoid is supposed to be heavily mined for its valuable resources, so the environment team began creating additional height maps for some of the older, more heavily affected areas throughout its history. Now, these are first pass explorations in Substance Designer, but they'll continue to evolve before eventually being incorporated into some of those amazing ones you saw in previous weeks.
So Nyx 1 was this location that was basically mined clean of all its valuable materials long ago. That's why it's talking about the long impacted locations. And in the words of the Galactopedia, the high-grade metals beneath the planet's surface were taken out. Once word got out, the planet briefly became the focus of military-backed mining contracts with Gold Horizon, and within 50 years, the planet was completely stripped of its resources and its material wealth shipped off to Killian to help with the Empire's growing war efforts. By 2630, Nyx 1s have been rendered permanently useless, and little evidence of human habitation remained. So that's what you're dealing with Nyx 1. Nyx in the system itself is a very, desolate place, aside from Delamar, where you have Levski, one of my favorite landing locations is. But there's a lot of mining still to be had, just not on Nyx 1 that much. So it's an interesting location. It's great to see it being fleshed out. I cannot wait to see the Nyx system, because the more work done on the Nyx system, including the planets, even the most desolate planet, Nyx 1, the faster we see the Nyx system come to fruition as soon as server mechanics allow. And we get Levski back, and we get a new place to explore that's completely different than what we're used to seeing today. That'll do it for my analysis on this video. I'm going to leave you with Justin Chambers' advice and guidance on how to get into content creation for gaming and how to get into editing for gaming. Some really cool stuff here. Wish you all a good night and fly safe.
The number one question I get asked is how to get into editing for games. And honestly, a lot of people focus their attention on the wrong things, in my opinion. They focus on the tips and tricks, like jump cut your talent to edit what they're saying, or for effect, or the fade down, the fade up, or the wipe. You can learn all those things. What you can't learn is POV. That's point of view, and everybody has one. And if you want to get into editing for games or filmmaking in general, you have to find yours and you have to grow it. And the only way that's going to happen is by doing. So my advice I give to anybody wanting to edit for video games or just edit in general is to cut.